How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. This is a show about wrestling. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard. And this week we are going to be covering, it's not a spotlight per se, but we are going to be covering Ronnie Garvin and his stint in the WWF. But before we get to that, I would just like to add that not this past Dynamite that was at Arthur Ashe Stadium, but the one before that, which was in Newark, New Jersey, I actually went to that event with my daughter, and it was a lot of fun. Our seats weren't the greatest. They were fairly nosebleedish, Leonard, but it was still fun, and it was cool to see. We got to see Kazarian versus Adam Cole, which was a pretty solid match, and CM Punk came out, and Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson and all that kind of stuff. It was a cool event to go to. Now, I had purchased these tickets pre-COVID, and it got delayed until now. But it was a good show to go to. I would say, just as a comparison from WWE to AEW in terms of production, it was much harder to hear what they were saying on the mic while you were sitting in the arena. Now on TV, I'm sure it's very clear, but like from where we were sitting, it was at times hard to hear what people were saying on the mic for whatever that.
I would be interested if that was an issue with AEW or if that's an issue just with that stadium.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure. But in any event, it was one merch booth, and it was a really super long line for the merch booth. But anyway, it was a fun show, and then they did a nice big show at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which was also pretty good. But anywho, Leonard, did you have some recent events to share as well?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, Extreme Rules was here. Some viewers might know that I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Extreme Rules was here on Sunday, which I totally forgot about until a friend of mine posted pictures that they had went. So that shows you how much I'm paying attention to the current product.
You didn't miss anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, and even like you said, you were up high, but still always cool to be there. To be
absolutely.
Like, I'm not a hockey fan, but I've gone to hockey games.
Right.
Just the experience of being there. But yeah, the interesting thing that I probably have done recently is that, and this would relate to your other show, your movie show, with Eric Lewers, is that I went to see the Room at Studio 35 here in Columbus, and Greg Sestero, who plays Oh Hi Mark, was there.
I love that that's what you call his character.
Yes. Well, I got his autograph on the actual script of The Room, and he wrote "Oh Hi Leonard," Greg Sestero on it, which this is what he does for all his autographs. Super nice, probably one of the nicest celebrities I've ever met. Interestingly enough, right when we got there, he was just sitting at the bar. It's a movie theater in the back with a bar in the front, that kind of place, and he was sitting at the bar, just having dinner, and we wound up sitting just near him. And I didn't want to bother him, but I'm wearing, and that's the reason I wore this, my Rambo mugshot shirt from the film.
Nice.
And he saw it and complimented me on it, and then we started talking because he's apparently reading the book First Blood right now, and is a huge fan of the film. And we got talking about the movie and some other stuff. And then for the rest of the night, he called me Johnny Rambo whenever he saw me. So
that's not a bad nickname to have.
Yeah, it's not a bad nickname to have. Greg Sestero knows me as Johnny Rambo. Also, his selfie game was strong. We went up to him, and Jenny, my wife, and I, he took my phone, grabbed it, and with one hand flipped it, hit the button to flip the camera, and then took like 3 pictures super fast and handed it back to me. And they were all, spot on. Everything was framed. Everything looked great. And I said that to him, and he said, "Yeah, I've had to become good at that." So he's someone who really appreciates the fans. He did about a half-hour Q&A where he answered questions. He has a super great sense of humor about it, and he's very humble about the fact that not just this film, but the fact that he did the book, The Disaster Artist Outfit, and then the movie came out of that. He's very humble. That's given him some fame. And, crazy enough, I saw like after he left Columbus, Ohio, he flew to Fargo, North Dakota, like the very next day to do the same thing Saturday night. And then I don't remember, I think it was Kansas City he went to, but he's on this barnstorming tour of the US, as it were. So anyway, for people who are interested in hearing about Ronnie Garvin, let's get to that.
Yeah. People who tuned in to hear about Ronnie Garvin are now hearing about The Room. No, you're not being punked.
No.
But anyway, let's get to Ronnie Garvin and his stint in the WWF. Just some background information. He was born Roger Barnes, and he is from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And he was born March 30th, 1945. And obviously, he would have stints in Jim Crockett Promotions, and more importantly, and obviously associated with the NWA. He would become NWA champion by defeating Ric Flair, and he would hold the title for 2 months before losing it back to Flair at Starrcade. And that would put him in a feud with Kevin Sullivan in the Varsity Club. This would also lead to him kind of turning heel by attacking Dusty Rhodes to keep him from defeating Barry Windham for the U.S. title. He was going to be managed by Gary Hart, but he left after only a few months as a heel before the August 12th card in Norfolk, Virginia, after a disagreement. So he would then have short stays in the AWA, and then he would also feud with Carlos Colon in Puerto Rico over the WWC Universal Heavyweight Championship. So that was in 1988, that last part with Puerto Rico and the AWA, and that would put him into the WWF. He ended up going there as a result of Pat Patterson. That was his in for, kind of getting into Vince's ear, so to speak. He would compete at the 1989 Royal Rumble, and he would be eliminated by Andre the Giant, which is probably, aside from Hulk Hogan, the best person to be eliminated by in the Royal Rumble, at least I would say.
At that time,
Yeah. He would have a match at WrestleMania 5 against Dino Bravo. He would lose that match. But then, obviously, he would go on to feud with Greg Valentine, and that would last pretty much his entire stay at WWF. So I'll pause there simply to get Leonard's thoughts on Ronnie Garvin's career before WWF and then leading into his start. So, Leonard, I know you're a huge Garvin fan. So when did you get into him?
As I think I've mentioned on the show before, when I was a kid, my great grandmother grew up in the home with me till I was about 12, and she watched wrestling with me. And her favorite wrestler was Ronnie Garvin, and her least favorite wrestler was Ric Flair. So that might have something to do with it in that '87 feud that they had. So yeah, I grew up a Garvin mark, and I think I mentioned a few years ago that I mentioned on the show that a few years ago I had met Ronnie Garvin at a big show in Circleville. And I got to do a locker room talk with him. So it was about 6, 7, 8 guys. Ronnie, who's a good friend of the show, was there with me. And we got to sit back and talk with Garvin for about an hour. And we talked mostly about his start in the business and his NWA run, but we did talk a little bit about his WWF run. And a lot of what he told us kind of coincided with some videos that I watched, him talking about it and Greg Valentine talking about him being in WWF. And one thing I'd like to, mention here before we get going is that one of the guys back there asked him about the nickname change, going from the man with the hands of stone to rugged Ronnie Garvin, and if he liked that. And he said he didn't care. If he said if Vince McMahon thought he could market rugged Ronnie Garvin better or could make more merchandise with rugged, that was fine. For what he was being paid to be there, he didn't care.
Right.
And I think that's a very important point about Ronnie Garvin, is I think he was always viewed as a company man. If you tell Ronnie Garvin to go out and do something, Ronnie Garvin's going to go do it. And that was how he got the NWA title for about 2 months, because they just wanted to do this hot shot change. And he said, sure, that he would do that because it was, considered to be best for business. So, and we did talk a little bit about the Greg Valentine feud, and this also coincides with the videos I watched. The idea that when he got there, he was basically asked, well, what do you want to do? Who do you want to work with?
Right.
And he said Greg Valentine, that they had worked I don't know if they had worked with each other, like opposite or in tag teams, or just around each other in Mid-Atlantic in the late 1970s. And so he was familiar with Greg, and of everyone on the roster, Greg was the guy who I think had a style the most similar to Ronnie. They both worked stiff, especially for the time period, and especially for what other WWF guys were doing. It was a feud way different. They were characters way different than what else the WWF was putting out at the time. Again, I was probably the only kid. I would have been 9-10 years old during Garvin's stint in the WWF. I was probably the only 10-year-old Garvin fan that was out there. But I'll turn it back to you to kind of profile that feud. But I really like that feud. I think it's an underrated feud, and I think there's two really cool elements of that feud that I'll let you go over, and then I'll chime in on.
Right. Well, as I said, this feud lasted a while. So he would have a match with Greg Valentine on April 22nd, 1989. Garvin won that match. And Valentine was interviewed immediately after this and challenged Garvin to a retirement match the next week. And Valentine won that match. So that kind of, you would think that might end the storyline, but it didn't. It actually started the storyline and kind of propelled it forward. Garvin would then get his wrestling or referee license, I should say, and would, referee during Valentine's matches, and, as well as Dino Bravo and Brooklyn Brawler, and would kind of fight with the wrestlers who didn't listen to his orders. He would have warnings from President Jack Tunney, and would end up punching Valentine during a match against Jimmy Snuka, which ended up getting him banned from refereeing. So at SummerSlam, he became the special ring announcer for Valentine's match against Hercules. And this was, was obviously very funny as well. And this kind of continued the feud, and this would involve Valentine asking that Garvin be reinstated so that he could have a match with him again. And so for the next few months, they would have matches at house shows and would kind of alternate victories, and then would have pretty much the feud end. It would be a submission match at the 1990 Royal Rumble, which Garvin won. Before the Royal Rumble, they would compete at the Survivor Series. They would be on opposite teams on the 4-on-4 Survivor Series elimination match. Garvin was a member of the 4x4s, and Valentine was a member of the King's Court. So after this feud, he was going to feud with Rick Martel. They would cut promos on each other, but the match between the two never happened on TV. They would, I guess, be together on a couple house shows with Martel winning, but Garvin would leave the WWF in November of 1990. And according to interviews, this was because it was hunting season and he wanted to go hunt. And that's when I heard that, Leonard, I couldn't help myself but be reminded of Sid and softball season and all those rumors. Garvin does not get critiqued for wanting to leave during hunting season.
Yeah,
I think it's more fun to make fun of Sid for softball season anyway.
Yes, I think along with softball Sid, we should add deer hunting Ronnie Garvin to the list of wrestlers.
Right, and he said in these interviews that he just didn't fit in there.
Yeah.
And you can't really argue with that. I love the feud with Valentine, but as you said, what was going on in that feud was very unlike anything else going on at the WWF at that time. And as far as the name goes, like that, he kind of had the right viewpoint in terms of not caring. I mean, it's just kind of the nickname part of his name. Like if they had, named him the Rugged Man, didn't want him to be referred to as Ronnie Garvin, that'd be a little bit different. It's not
today he'd be something like Reginald Gibson.
Yeah, or they
might
pull a Daniel Bryan on him, and this is
Gary Ronald,
Garvin Ronald coming to the ring, which is just ridiculous. But Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the name was what it was. I remember him as a kid, and I remember like not really knowing a whole lot about this guy's personality,
Mhm.
but loving the Garvin Stomp. So
Yes.
I thought the Garvin Stomp was really really good as a setup to a finisher. But yeah, I mean, he and Greg Valentine pretty much personify his tenure in WWF, and these guys beat the shit out of each other,
Yeah.
and that's what made it better, in my opinion. Not only did they have chemistry in the ring, but they did not hold back, and you felt it. You felt the chemistry because of it. So, Leonard, I know that you like this feud. So, you
Oh
have any
yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was always more, and we talked about this, more of an NWA kid than a WWF kid. I don't know. So this felt like very much of an NWA style feud with the types of matches they were putting on. I mean, they were doing the chops, and you heard them.
Yeah.
It was stiff, and I absolutely loved the angle of Garvin becoming a referee. You've never seen that before, and I don't think you've seen that since. I mean, you've
Right.
seen referees go bad and become managers and become wrestlers, like Danny Davis. Tay Long became a
But not
manager.
as a result of being retired.
Yes, but not as a role as being retired and becoming a referee, and then having a face biased referee who's going against the heels and is being favoriting the faces. So it was really unique. And I know Garvin said that that was his idea. Everything, I think, part of the Valentine feud was his idea,
Right.
and it was certainly different. Again, it was something that every angle comes back at some point in wrestling, but I don't think that is one that had. And I could see someone making that work, especially today with the
Yeah.
way the more sports entertainment slate is. Slant, that's the word I wanted, slant. Also, to the ring announcer thing is hilarious because he when he like was reading Valentine's stats, he said, "Oh, he's 30 pounds heavier than this," like that. And it was very funny, and you could tell. And I always thought as a kid, and I don't think they ever said this out loud, but it was Jack Tunney not liking Greg Valentine and allowing Garvin to mess with him,
Right.
and allowing Garvin to do enough that Valentine would ask for his reinstatement. That was always the connotation I got, even though they never kind of said that.
Right.
And then one thing that you didn't mention was another aspect of the feud, especially after Garvin came back, was their competing shin guards. That
Right.
Greg Valentine had the Heartbreaker shin guard, which was supposedly adding more pressure to the figure four when he would apply it. And he would sometimes take it off and use it to hit a guy with. And then so Ronnie Garvin had a shin guard called the Hammer Jammer, which was supposed to counteract his shin guard and also add to his move. He was using the sharpshooter at this time. And when we did the locker room talk with Garvin, he mentioned that was his idea as well, because he always wanted to do a feud with Ric Flair, where the idea was who does the best figure four, because Garvin used the figure four as well.
Right.
And Flair said, no, because I do the best figure four. That's not like a question. We're not doing that. So he brought that up, I guess, to Vince, and then they threw in the shin guard aspect of it. And as a kid, I always wanted as memorabilia a Hammer Jammer shin guard and a monogrammed Ronnie Garvin towel. So anyone out there listening, Christmas is coming. Just to
Yeah.
put that out there.
Yeah, that would be a cool piece of memorabilia to have, and that was a pretty eye catching part of their Royal Rumble submission match, I thought,
Mhm.
and it actually added to the card in my opinion because it was kind of a break from the usual match, and it added to it. This was a feud that had been built over a long period of time, and both guys were really making it work, and this was a cool way to put it to a close.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when we do spotlights, we talk about some notable matches, and pretty much the notable matches are the ones we mentioned. He had a match against Dino Bravo. He
Yeah.
was in the Royal Rumble in 1989, and he had the feud with Greg Valentine. And I watched, I guess, what would have been a random house show match on the MSG network between he and Valentine. And in that particular one, Greg Valentine won. And
Yeah, he did get some jobber matches. I know.
yeah, those are out there as well.
Yeah, like against Barry Horowitz and the usual suspects.
Right.
But yeah, it's very interesting to note that mostly Garvin, it was Garvin and Valentine, and then those couple of other blips, like you said, against Bravo, which we talked about when we did our underrated and favorite WrestleManias, and we talked about WrestleMania 5, and that's only 3 minutes long, but I think it could have been better if they would have cut some dead weight and gave them about 10 minutes.
Right.
It's interesting to note that Bravo's Canadian, as is Garvin, and he was supposed to feud with Martel, who's also Canadian, and
Right.
I think that would have been a good feud.
Yeah.
Because I think they would have gelled well. You know, Martel is a little bit more athletic than Garvin. Garvin's a little bit bigger and stronger. So I think they could work really well together. And I'll ask you this, of anyone else in the WWF at the time, and I know this is off the top of your head, who could Ronnie Garvin have feuded with? The only other person I really thought of was Earthquake, because Earthquake's also Canadian. Earthquake was also managed by Jimmy Hart like Valentine. So it would be an easy segue. You know, Earthquake goes after Garvin in order to get revenge for Valentine for the Royal Rumble loss. And, you know, you mentioned the Garvin stomp. Earthquake does like the trimmer stomp before he does the splash. So they both have like this stomp move.
Right.
So I thought Garvin Earthquake, I think, could have been something.
Well, that would have been a good one, you know, but I would also say, I think that, you know, we should have seen what he could have done as heel. You know, he left NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, before we really got to see how he's going to do as a heel. I think if he had been heel at some point in WWF, like he could have feuded with somebody like Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I think that would have been an interesting feud to see. And that would have kind of opened up the options. You know, I mean, like he could have feuded with, you know, Honky Tonk Man or something like that, but that's not really a match I want to see, you know?
No.
So, you know, and like when you think about Ronnie Garvin and Rick Rude, I don't know. Like, I don't know that those styles would mesh, but like, you know, like the possibilities are endless, but especially if he would have made him a heel, I think that he could have done a lot of things in that regard. But what's interesting about this is that, you know, he would return to Puerto Rico after this and spend some more time there, but his, you know, full time in wrestling was pretty much done after this stint in WWE. He would go to Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling promotion and feud with Paul Orndorff and Kevin Sullivan. He ran his own promotion in Knoxville, Tennessee called Tennessee Mountain Wrestling from 1995 to 2001. He would make, you know, sporadic appearances at independent promotions, you know, and would compete at the Legends Battle Royal at the Juggalo Championship Wrestling event, which I don't think that would be a career highlight for Mr. Garvin.
You know, and I don't think I've mentioned this before. I actually saw Ronnie Garvin wrestle in an indie show here in Ohio, mid 90s. I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. The main event was Ronnie Garvin versus Abdullah the Butcher. The sub main was Junkyard Dog versus Prince Harris the Mummy, which was a dude in the mummy suit. And then the other notable match was Bobby Fulton versus Freebird Badstreet, which was just a dude in the Freebird gimmick. It was not Brad Armstrong, I would be reasonably sure. And that was in a barn at a fairgrounds.
Right.
Yes, but I remember, I got to talk to Ronnie Garvin, and I got his autograph. And even though I spelled my name, he misspelled my name.
How did he spell it?
He left the O out. He spelled it Lenard. And I know he's
can't really say anything.
And it's oddly enough that when I have had my name misspelled, it's been because Rutger Hauer also misspelled my name on an autograph, who's Dutch.
Right.
So I think it's maybe something with the foreign, maybe they spell Leonard different in foreign lands. I don't know. But even when I spell it, but when I got Ronnie Garvin's autograph the second time at the Circleville show, we did get that correct.
Well,
so I do have a correct spell.
You spell your name differently, then the regular, please let us know.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, but anyway, I want to say that in close here is I think Ronnie Garvin is tremendously underrated and overlooked today, and I think a main reason for that is because that cup of coffee he had with the NWA World Title, it's
Right.
looked down upon.
It is.
He,
Yeah.
if he had a longer run, maybe, or if he didn't have the run at all, maybe. But it was just that small blip that I think makes people overlook him.
Yeah, they kind of scoff at it because it was just a matter of getting the belt off Flair just so that he could win it back again.
Right.
And he does deserve more credit than that.
Yeah, and when we talked to him about that, and again, he did that because he was a good company man. That's what they wanted. But he only defended it one time, and it was a favor to a promoter up in the Portland, Oregon area. And he said it snowed, and like 10 people showed up, and the guy still paid him what they agreed to, even though Garvin said, "Don't worry about it. Just get me home. Just honor the plane ticket."
Right.
And but he still insisted on paying Garvin. I don't remember the name of the promoter now, and I don't remember who he said he defended it. I don't think he did say who he defended it against. Maybe we can look that up somewhere. But that would be interesting to know. But when you talk about his WWF run, which we've done here tonight, it's largely under the radar. I think that feud with Valentine went really long, and it was a mid-card feud.
Right.
And it was something that the core audience of the WWF at the time, being kids, wouldn't have gone into.
Right.
And Garvin's personality overall, I don't think really appeals. And that's a knock against him too, is that he wasn't a great promo. I think a lot of that has to do with that French patois accent that he has.
Right.
And you can find some Garvin promos online that kind of make fun of how bad they are, kind of the stuff that he's saying, but great in the ring, really competent, and overall it's just not a good fit of personality. I know that it was talked about that Pat Patterson gave him a call, but I have to wonder why Vince McMahon would want him anyway. And the only thing I can think of is just because he was a former NWA champion, and so that Vince could tick a box
or a favor to Pat.
Yeah, and or a favor to Pat, because you've heard plenty of stories of Pat going, and Jim Cornette tells these stories too, where they wanted to use a guy and you just had to pitch him the right way to Vince. Like you had to know how to talk to Vince to get him to not only want the guy, but to think it was his idea in the first place. That's probably what happened. Pat was trying to throw him a bone, given what he was doing at the time. But as I said, I love Ronnie Garvin. I'm glad we did this and was able to talk about him. And if you haven't watched, again, you don't need to find the jobber matches, but find particularly that Royal Rumble match. It's probably Garvin's one of his the feud with Flair. I actually like. I like both matches he had with Flair during that, where he wins the title and drops the title back, and that Valentine match. And I would probably have to sit down and watch some other things to make a list. But those would probably be, in my estimation, the top 3 Ronnie Garvin matches, especially the ones easy to find.
And he wasn't a cartoonish character.
No.
And that was what the WWF was, it was their bread and butter, was characters that were larger than life, and which makes me wonder why he tried to go to WWF. I guess he wanted work and wanted money, but like he had a ready-made feud coming with Dusty Rhodes in NWA.
Yeah.
And I think he fit there really well. And I think his legacy might be more known if he had stayed there and maybe had feuds, over the US title, or, had, partnered with Wyndham for tag team title matches, whatever. But he kind of is another one of those guys that played hopscotch a little bit, in that he would be in AWA, he would be in Puerto Rico, he'd be in WWF, and aside from the Flair feud in NWA, never made his enough of a mark as he could have. But I agree with you that he's very underrated in the ring. I think he has a really good style that can mesh well with technical people and with people who are just brawlers, which is a good trait to have. And yeah, it would have been cool to see him have other feuds, though.
Yeah. And just overall, I know too, and because I don't know if you were continuing to go down the path after he retired from wrestling, he did have his own promotion for a while in the Tennessee area that he ran. I believe he had a training school.
Yep.
So he's a guy that is very smart to the business.
Yeah.
As far as being able to do things, and he ran his own promotion. I doubt that there's a lot of tapes or stuff out there. I would love to see some stuff, because if the Valentine feud is any indication, he's a good booker. He has good ideas. Again, that the shin guard thing was original, the referee thing was original. So I would like to, and the reason that he probably didn't say become like a Pat Patterson was I don't think he had the drive to. If you see him in interviews, he's very laid back, he's very chill. And I got this too when I met him. You would ask him a question, he was just like, oh, and just very calm about it. Would tell you a story like he was ordering a sandwich. Not the greatest storyteller on earth, even though he had great stories to tell and was very open.
He wouldn't have been a lifer for the road.
Yeah.
And I think that would have, I think he could have offered, some of the generations after him a lot of wisdom and advice and training. But if you're not made for that lifestyle, then you're not made for that lifestyle. So
yeah, I mean, he's still, pre-COVID, I know he was still making personal appearances. He wasn't wrestling, but he would make appearances. And that Circleville show I mentioned, he was the, what was it? He was the guest ring enforcer for the main event, something like that, just to be out there.
Right. Well, I hope you have enjoyed our coverage of Ronnie Garvin in the WWF. Let us know what you thought of it, what your memories are of him. And we will be coming at you next week with a new installment of our Down and Dirty Move Breakdown, which is always a fun one for us. And for Leonard, my name is Chad. We will see you next week. Alexa will see you out.